Hello, it's the Bad Mini Painter, and to celebrate that Games Workshop are doing a bunch of Orc stuff this month, I decided to buy a lot of Orcs. And in this lot there were 3 Killa Kans, 1 plastic, fairly mangled, and 1 metal. It's a chunky little piece, the metal model. Well done. That's a good sentence. But anywho, I thought it could be fun to paint up a metal and a plastic one and then compare them. Now, again, the plastic one has seen, well, some damage. So take that with a grain of salt, right? Anywho, so I start out with medium rust. I'm going to do the exact same color scheme and layers on both the modern plastic one and the chunky heavy metal one. It's been a long while since I've painted a metal model, and I keep getting impressed about the amount of details they actually managed to get into these. So, AK Interactive medium rust as the base layer. Next I go in with the Skulker Yellow to just kind of color in the parts on the armor I want yellow. And that's the decorations around on the models. So they have these logos, symbols, which are much more extruded on the plastic model. And Skulker Yellow from Two Thin Coats normally has pretty good coverage, but on top of red apparently it needs 2 layers, which I got. And again, just trying to be careful not to hit the base color I already added there. Next I go over both models with the deep red from AK Interactive, and I do it kind of loosely. So I try to stay clear of the recesses with this color. And it's simply to brighten it up a bit. I think that the rust red gives a good base color to work from. And adding the deep red on top of it really adds a lot of saturation. Is that the right one? Anywho, afterwards I go over everything with the Seraphim Sepia from Citadel. And yeah, it's the first shading, so I can just slap it on there, which is my favorite technique. Just slap, 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 slap. And again, it's the same for both models. I try to avoid the pooling, but if it pools, that's not really a big deal. It's something I can handle later. Now there is a lot of metal parts on both models, so it was a fairly big job to color all of those in. I decided to use Iron Hand Steel for that. It's a bit brighter than Lead Belcher, and it's one of my favorite Citadel acrylic paints. It thins down nicely. You can thin it quite a bit without it losing all of the pigmentation or becoming too thin. So it's still pretty saturated. So 1 layer is normally enough, and just it flows quite nicely. So one thing about painting metal models. Anywho, one thing about that is that they're fairly heavy. So you're gonna want to support your hand when holding the models. My wrist actually started cramping up because this is a big chunk of metal that you're holding, and You have to get into different positions and all that good stuff. So awkward angles and stuff like that. So there's one reason to prefer plastic. Next I do bright bronze, and it's just to break up all the metal, because everything can become quite monochrome and silvery if you don't add something else to it. And bright bronze from Vallejo has good coverage, flows nicely, and you can thin it down without breaking it apart. And that's a quality I like in my metal paints. Now, the two models are generally fairly similar. The plastic one is, of course, modernized and given the Games Workshop overhaul, which means that everything has just become slightly bigger. That's what they do with their models. They become bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So, I guess in 10 years we will all be playing with Titans. Anywho, but they're pretty similar in the way of where to apply what paint. They have the same overall aesthetic, and having them in a group of three, the plastic one doesn't really stand out as a sore thumb or anything like that. For all the wires and hoses, I decided to do Corvus Black, which is this rubber black from Citadel. And it's a fairly nice black, so I use it when it's at hand. Yeah. And I'm generally just going over the models, looking for all the wires and blocking them in with the black. And even though the design is slightly varied, it's again basically the same thing for both models. I decided to use a Screaming Skull for fabric, and there is some rope around the guns, and then there are the tusks on the cans. And I could have done a lot of stuff with those. They could have become metal, but I kind of like the idea of adding something organic to it, or organic looking anyway. So I decided to give it Screaming Skull to make it look like, well, bone. Tusks, I guess, is the word. Kind of. And my new favorite shading, Oiled Earth from Vallejo. It works pretty great on everything. And the Vallejo shades has this wonderful effect to them that they don't really dull everything down, and they go, like, it's a thin shade, so it goes to the recesses, which is really what you want. But had I used Agrax Earth, I would need to come back and go over everything again to brighten the colors up again. It's not necessary, or it's not necessary to the same degree with the shades from Vallejo. And Oiled Earth is this dark brownish one. And even though it looks bad as when applied, like, okay, this is going to dull everything down, as soon as it settles, it's basically only in the recesses. I decided to use Caldo Sky for the windows, and the attentive viewer will see that there's quite a bit of grass on the hand. I decided to clean that up with the airbrush, just and it blew right off. And that's because I decided to save some time and do the bases while the shading was drying, because it has to dry for 30 minutes or so. Yes. Light Rust, also from AK Interactive, and that's simply to highlight everything after the shading. And what I do is I just touch all the little nails and rivets, and I give the edges a fairly sloppy edge highlight, because this is allowed to look kind of worn and torn. So I'm not really going for sharp highlights, which is good because I'm bad at doing those. but more like clunky, random-ish. So the line doesn't have to have the same thickness all the way through. It's okay if it varies a little bit because it's just as the paint job has been worn, scratched and so forth. See? Clever. Yellow flame from two thin coats to highlight the yellow, well, parts, and that's basically the teeth, but also the logos or decorations here and there on their armor. And trying to be careful not to fuck up what I already done, but yeah. I thinned it down quite a bit. That's also something you can do with two thin coats. One could argue that the name would be misleading if that wasn't a possibility, but luckily it is. And I decided to go around the edges on the decorations. So again, it adds a little bit of interest, and it's a minimum effort job. Like, it doesn't take a lot. And we're almost done. I decided I wanted it to look a little bit more worn and like. So I decided to slap some Stormhoof silver, and I decided to do this with a fairly messed up dry brush that has some really stiff bristles. So yeah, it's kind of like dry brushing but with a stabbing motion, and it gives a nice effect where the paint has been scratched off, peeled off, shot off, whatever. And it's also quite an easy way to add like a lot of details to your models, even though it can seem totally random when you're done, and if you haven't overdone it, it looks intentional, everything, and it looks like you spend a lot of time on it, which is smart. And that's pretty much it. So the end result looks like this. Plastic model in the middle. Fairly banged up plastic model, but still. And I'm actually pretty happy with this result. I think it was a really good idea to give it a good and thorough stabbing with the Stormhoof silver. That did a nice difference. So I don't know which of the models I actually prefer. I think maybe the old metal. There's something about it, and an amazing detail level, considering the material they're working with and the time they were like produced in. Anywho, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful in some way. If you did, please do leave a like. Please do subscribe if you haven't done so already. I do content like this, so this is what you're getting if you subscribe. So, see, there's no lie, no false advertising. Anywho, thank you so much for your time. I know it's valuable, and hopefully I will see you soon for another video of me destroying some models. Bye.